So, what I'm going to talk about today is as a little bit of a tangent, maybe, to what, if you're used to listening to me, I usually talk about. It will still be referring to subjects like verification, fact checking, and so on. But it's a train of thought that's kind of captured me over the past 12 months or so. And it brings together some of the issues, such as verification, news, and information literacy, and seeing whether we can bring these things together into the editorial process and address what I think is a radically changed media environment to the one many of us came up through. So I was not sure how to title this, and I did originally title it as it was News Literacy, a Media Approach. I've also toyed with the idea of talking about reporting in a hostile environment because, as you know, if you've been a journalist for a long time, things have changed radically. And I'm not sure that in most cases we as media have made the necessary changes to keep up with this changed environment. So just get my slide deck up here, give it a moment. So in the end, I've gone with a kind of a mishmash title here, and some people might come up with a better one for me by the end of our session. But another thing I want to do today is to encourage quite a bit of interactivity, because I looked at the list of people who had signed up for this, and there is just a huge diversity, depth, and breadth of experience and expertise here. And it would be a terrible waste if you were to just spend 90 minutes listening to me talking at you. So please, at any point, if you have any contributions, any questions, suggestions, criticisms, or anything, please feel free to raise a hand. I will be putting up a virtual pinboard at some point, and we can also contribute to that, because I find very often what happens is with these sessions, with a lot of thought involved, that people think of questions and other things maybe after it's over. And rather than feeling frustrated and saying, when are we going to get the chance to discuss this again? I always encourage people to contact me or to contribute to our pinboard, and then the contents of that, which I will then share to everybody who has signed up, because we have emails for people, so that you can all benefit from this huge, as I say, depth and breadth of experience and expertise we have out there. Now, first of all, the whole point of talking about news literacy and media literacy is that, in my own experience over the past couple of years, it's a discipline that is very much academia driven. It's a thing that's being taught, I think, a lot more than brought directly into practice. When it does enter the media or journalistic sphere, it tends to be just something that's tagged on, often as a bit of an afterthought, and maybe not given the prominence and the importance that it should have in our editorial processes. And it tends to have its own time and space allotted. You will see it mentioned and brought up and averred to in columns and specials and things like that, but it's always kept very much kind of compartmentalized or pigeonholed. Now, what I would like to see is that this would change to the point where it becomes more driven by the media. After all, it is a discipline that pertains to the media. So I think we do generally recognize the importance of this, and it's something that we should be bringing more into our everyday work. It should be seen as integral to journalism, a part of the actual processes and practices that we carry out all the time. And it should be ever present. It should be something that's always at the back of our minds, at least, maybe even at the forefront, and not something that's just brought up every so often. Now, when I talk about media literacy, I'm not here to teach anybody about media literacy, because there are many people doing an amazing job at that already. Some of you who have been to TMS or other events will have had the great privilege of attending workshops by Masato, who's pictured here with his team. And this is just one of the many great resources out there on learning about news literacy, its relevance, its importance, and its practice. If there's a QR code there that will bring you to Strapline, which is basically something of a blog or a collection of very helpful articles about news literacy and its place in the media environment. Masato and his team in Hong Kong are among the leading proponents of this worldwide, I believe. That blog and other linked resources to it are very well worth a look. They're not overly taxing. They're very concise and informative. So when you get a chance, bookmark that and maybe go and have a run through it. However, I do think that media literacy is still a relatively niche field when it comes to actual day-to-day journalism. It's still something that we acknowledge, but maybe don't put as much focus on as maybe we should. And I would like to see whether we can bring it to the forefront of thinking right across media, make it an integral part of the editorial process. We all know how important it is to have a good headline, to write a good lead or intro, to select and edit our images and things like that. And I would hope that the importance of media literacy is something that will become as embedded in our editorial thinking and our editorial practice as any of these things. So just to be absolutely clear about it, I'm not talking about these things which are being done already. I'm also not denigrating these things because I think they are important and they are very helpful. We see features explaining to a readership or an audience how to understand the news, how to spot fake news, how to spot fabrications and hoaxes and so on. And these things have a place and they are important. We also have journalists and academics and others going out into schools and organizations and so on to do workshops about news literacy and media literacy. And as I say, these things are important and they do have a place. But what I'm talking about today and what I would like to see the next level that this could be taken to is to integrate news literacy principles and practices directly into editorial workflows. And also then using this to promote it in your audience so that it becomes a crucial part of the way people consume media and the way that we produce media and produce reports, bringing our everyday editorial standards, our editorial practices to bear in such a way that the audience has to become aware of the importance and the place of news literacy. And this is very often the approach that I get. You know, I live in Germany, which practices and standards are very deeply embedded, and very often there's a bit of conservatism and a suspicion of radical change. And you get used to having to explain why things must change. And we have our practices and our fundamentals of journalism that have existed for a very long time and have served us well for a very long time. And I'm not suggesting we throw those out and ignore them. But we are in a radically changed media environment. We do not operate in a vacuum, not that we have at any point, but to a much greater extent, our work is subject to, let's say, tampering, interaction, engagement, whatever you want to call it. And you're under greater scrutiny, greater criticism, and a lot of the time, a huge volume of malicious engagement compared to at any previous time. And we know that there are powerful, determined, organized, disciplined players who are out there who are doing their utmost to undermine both your credibility, that of your news organization or outlet, and that of your message. So given that the environment in which we exist and operate has changed so radically, to me, it just makes sense that we have to adjust our footing in order to deal with this. You hear expressions like change or die and things like that, and maybe they sound a bit overly dramatic. But it is the case that if the environment in which you operate is changing, you should be able to adjust. And it's crucial that you do adjust. This is a very popular saying that you see bandied about from time to time, very often attributed to George Orwell, like so many other things. I'm not sure Orwell actually said this at any point, but journalism is printing what someone else does not want published. Everything else is public relations. And it encapsulates this idea of journalism as being something that will afflict the comfortable and hold people's feet to the fire, hold people up to better standards. But you can see straight away, that this does introduce an element of discomfort, confrontational approach, maybe even a little hostility. And it's something that, of course, we are always going to have to expect pushback on. Now, this is one of these aphorisms or sayings that is made by somebody who's trying to put something across. But if you want to get this kind of idea directly from somebody who is involved in that kind of activity, you don't need to look any further than the man who is credited, whether fully correctly or not, with the rise of Donald Trump to the United States presidency, Steve Bannon. And pardon the language here, but Steve Bannon once told a journalist in a conversation that the real opposition, as far as he was concerned, to Donald Trump and the Republicans was not the Democratic Party, was not other political parties or opposition. He said the real opposition is the media. And the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit. Now, maybe not the most delicate way of putting it, but you can see quite clearly what he's doing here. It's not necessarily that you need to use propaganda or disinformation in order to persuade people that your viewpoint and your way is legitimate. It's, as so often in the field of propaganda and disinformation, it's to obfuscate. It's to hog the information space and to give people so much information, whether true or false, that they have difficulty deciding what is real. And this is a tactic that has been embraced more and more over the past few years, just getting claims out there. It can be very difficult to deal with because if you're a journalist of integrity, you want to rebut and debunk these things with correct and accurate information. Now, of course, that puts you at a disadvantage because you are in combat with people who have an endless resource of disinformation because they simply have to make things up. They don't have to take the time and the care that you do to bring a response to that. So it is a very difficult situation to be in, and it's not very balanced. So first of all, who is doing this? Who is putting this garbage out there? And we will find just from our own experiences that it varies from just individuals who are putting out tweets or sharing memes or stuff like that to groups who are then coordinating and organizing and doing this on a much more, how would I say, almost to the level of a campaign. So when it gets to that point, it definitely makes things more difficult because you're not dealing with a single rogue actor. Now, it can get a lot more serious and go from these kind of groups and splinter groups and so on to right up to state level actors. We know that there are governments and their proxies worldwide who are taking cognizance of the power of disinformation spread online and using it to their benefit and using it to undermine journalists and using it to undermine entire news organizations. We've seen so much of this throughout the Middle East, through parts of Asia, in the United States, and all over that it's regarded as legitimate by a lot of these kind of bodies or entities. Why might somebody do this? If we talk at the level of individuals, it can be purely for mischief. Some people get a great kick out of tricking the media, maybe wanting to directly undermine them, or maybe not even with an eye to that, maybe simply just thinking that it's fun to do so. And this kind of thing goes back quite a few years. In my own country, Ireland, there was one several years ago when a composer had died. There was a student who went into Wikipedia and edited that composer's Wikipedia entry with a fake quote that was then carried by major reputable media all over the world in their obituaries. And that was a guy who was originally doing just for fun, but did make the point that he was pointing out how the media can be tricked and manipulated. Why might people do this? Again, some people may have grudges. Some people may have a point they're trying to make, and so on. When you get to the level then of groups and so on, it could be ideological. They're trying to push a particular ideology, a particular religious affiliation or viewpoint, and so on, and they will not hesitate to use disinformation to do so. And that's one thing if it's just false information they're putting around the place, but of course it can rise to the level of promoting hate and promoting hate speech and promoting acts of hatred. So that's the point at which it can start to get very dangerous. Another one, and I talked about state level actors, of course it can be about control. It can be about discrediting dissidents, discrediting political opposition, discrediting activists and civic organizations, and therefore strengthening the control of a government or regime over the population that it rules. So, as you can see, there are numerous levels, and there are numerous degrees of danger and harm done by these. Now, how is it done? Well, very often it's done by simply attacking the message, taking each report as it comes, trying to dismantle and discredit and undermine it. But very often, and perhaps more dangerously, it can take the form of attacking the messenger. By that, I mean the reporter or the outlet. And this can be done in ways like trying to simply just embarrass somebody, but it can get to the point of promoting violence or harm against that person. And this is the point at which it becomes very dangerous and insidious. And we have seen this again all over the world, that particular journalists who are seen as a threat to regimes or seen as a threat to political parties or anything like that are attacked and made to seem like the enemy or the outsider. And of course, these people who spread this kind of disinformation do not need to directly attack that person, but they can be promoting the idea that this person deserves to be attacked, and sooner or later, somebody will act on this. Now, how is this done? It can be through attacking the accuracy of a specific report. It can be the way a report is framed. They can say, well, the way this is said makes it harmful to this cause, and that's unfair, and so on. So they look at the nuance, the language, the terminology used, perhaps the context in which some reporting is being done, and accuse the person of deliberately or through incompetence causing false perceptions. Then there are things such as affiliations. As a journalist, I'm sure some of you have been accused at some point of belonging to a sect or a religion or a racial group or a political political party or group, and that this affects your reporting and that this is why you are covering a certain story in a certain way. People's motivations are also attacked. So they're saying, well, somebody wants to get more famous, or maybe they're getting paid, or again, motivation ties in with affiliation. Are they a member of a particular group that is influencing the reporting? And all of these things are called into question, not always directly, but through implication, through nuance, and pointing out that somebody is saying something in a certain way. Could there be a problem with their affiliation, with their motivation? Are they consciously or subconsciously framing the story in a certain context? And are they therefore not producing credible reporting? And another question of how this is done. I'm showing my age here now with the typewriter. But yeah, this is the way that it used to be done. If somebody had something critical to say about your reporting, the letter to the editors, who in those days was almost invariably a sir, but the letter to the editor criticizing yourself or your reporting or both. And there was a certain degree, at least, of I don't want to use the term control because that implies that we're trying to suppress things, but at least being able to deal with this directly. People were entitled to contact your news outlet and criticize your reporting. You were entitled to a right of reply. If your right of reply was particularly strident, if your reply was, then they would be entitled to a right of reply as well. And that was all quite easy process compared to what we have now. Because now, where does the criticism come from? Social media, overwhelmingly, I think. You will see as soon as a story goes out there, there will be tweets, there will be Facebook posts, there will be maybe even TikTok videos and all kinds of things attacking your reporting, attacking yourself, your employer, your outlet, and so on. But it's not limited to that. You will also have blogs and websites on the fringes of the media, many of them with very large followings, that will also attempt to undermine you and your work. Sometimes it's even other media, because as we know, nobody is without an agenda. And in some cases, that's more obvious and more dramatic than others. And there will be media who do set out with the intention of undermining you and possibly supporting a particular side. And of course, that can be quite dangerous because they may have a very large and very committed audience. Now, what I want to do at this point is take 10 minutes break and have you take a look at this survey. There's a short link there, and there is a QR code. Either of these will take you to a form with a set of questions. And it's just to kind of sharpen our focus a little bit and have a think about how these things are affecting us in our day-to-day work. So I'm going to turn off my camera and mic here. I'm going to leave you for 10, maybe 15 minutes on this, just to have a think about how these things have affected you and the people you work with. So I'll get back in between 10 and 15 minutes. Okay, I see quite a few answers coming in on the survey. I'll give you just a few more minutes and then we'll get back. We'll take a look through the figures first and the answers on that, but I'll give you another 2 or 3 minutes for anybody who hasn't finished it yet. I won't delay too long because I do want to give plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this. Yeah, so we're still getting a few more answers coming in here on the survey. And I will provide the results of this to anybody who wants them. I'll provide them to everybody on the mailing list from this workshop, just in case you want to take a look at them later or have any comment. It's not a particularly scientific survey in the framing of the questions or the selection process or anything else, but just basically a snapshot of people's experiences from this particular group. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. I'm not going to close it or anything, so if you are still putting answers to those, that's not a problem. You can continue to do so. I'm just going to put it up on screen, though, just so we can all have a look at it. So we do, first of all, have this situation where in the first one, there are a lot of people. I mean, the majority have some experience of either having themselves been targeted or a colleague or the particular news outlet that they work for. I'm just going to run through the answers to all of them first, and then we can take a few minutes. If anybody has any particular comment that they want to make about this, please feel free to chime in. Do hit the button to raise your hand on the Meet. So the second one, what has been targeted? And it's interesting to me that it has been the particular approach, the integrity agenda or affiliation of the journalist or outlet. I maybe should have asked people to specify there whether it was the outlet or the journalist that was being blamed in this regard. But it is interesting, and that in almost as many or a few less cases, the actual accuracy of the reporting itself. It doesn't surprise me at all to see that social media has been the main platform or the main channel for providing this kind of criticism. It's so easy. It's something that people can do with just a click of a button, often without putting much thought into it. And this is one of the insidious things with social media as well, that people not only feel entitled to respond in this way, but don't really have to spend much time considering whether they should do so. It's very instant, it's very visceral, And as we've seen over the past few years, it can be brought to quite nasty and dangerous levels as well. I see some people are still taking the old-fashioned approach of directly contacting reporters and news outlets, and that can be double-edged. It can take one of two directions. It can be either seen as a sign of respect or a sign of attempted intimidation. I'm sure people have had both of those experiences. And I'm, I guess, slightly taken aback at the overwhelming presence of allegations of prejudice in this. But then again, I guess there are different forms of prejudice. There are different kind of accusations people can make. So maybe it shouldn't be surprising. And also we have people here from countries such as India, which have a huge diversity of religious affiliations and so on. So maybe that can give rise to more of these kind of allegations and accusations. I've worked with journalists who have experienced all of these kinds of abuse over the years. And yeah, the one thing they have in common is that none of them are particularly pleasant to try to deal with. There's a good healthy chunk here saying that it did not undermine the effect of the report at all, 28%, which is heartening. Of course, that's our own perception as well. We would always hope that our reporting has not been undermined. How accurate we are in that respect, I don't know. But in general, I do think that journalists are a pretty good judge of that kind of thing. The largest one there is that it did slightly undermine the effect of the report, as you'd probably expect, because there are certain people who will be persuaded by those kind of approaches. And as to how outlets responded, quite a healthy chunk say not at all, which of course would be ideal if we feel capable of just ignoring these kind of things and hoping that they haven't had any effect. Then we have follow-up reports and sometimes responding directly to the entities targeting the reporting. I'd be interested in knowing specifics on that, if anybody can give me an example. And then finally, knowing what efforts were made to undermine reporting or integrity and how they were made. Would you have approached the creation of the report differently? And a quarter of our respondents say yes. And another big chunk, 43%, are saying possibly, unsure whether they would or not. And that's what we're going to move on to talking about next, about how we could possibly make things different and how we could approach our reporting in order to maybe inoculate or insulate ourselves against these things. Now, before I move on to that, please feel free to ask any questions you may have for the next few minutes, or even if you have any suggestions, any examples of how you have dealt with this kind of thing yourself. Now is as good a time as any to bring them up. Jatin, I see you've got a hand up there. You, please unmute and...
Yeah, so hi, Eoghan. This is not a question, but a comment.
Can I unmute you?
Can you hear me now? Am I audible?
I'm not hearing you, Jatin. You're not muted, so I'm not quite sure why that is.
Okay, Lim says I'm audible.
Okay, sorry. I changed my own
Is this
sound
fine now?
settings. Yeah, there we are. There we go. Perfect. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, great. So not a question, but a comment. Two
Yeah.
questions on one, what was the effect on the story?
Yeah.
And as you said, a large chunk said nothing, probably because the threat is post facto. The second thing is how did it change the report?
Yeah.
Now, if we were to include, I think, questions on the long-term effects on both the journalists, the newsroom, as well as the reporting, then maybe we will see a different trend. Because in India, we have seen this a lot. People
so you're
are
saying
threatened.
Sorry for cutting you off. There's a little bit of a lag.
Go on.
So you're saying the effect on the way that journalists would approach future stories?
Yes. For instance, since the current government came to power in 2014, the current disposition, they have arrested about 10,000 people under the UAPA, which is a very draconian law, which they often also use against journalists or their critics. So what happens is that when you arrest one person, 15 other fall in line.
Yeah.
So that is an issue that perhaps we
So
need to
it's basically a
talk
chilling
about
or an intimidatory effect on journalism.
on
So
your future journalism. Yes.
yeah. So you're talking about Jen here specifically response or criticisms coming from government entities, yeah?
Yes, and other powerful entities
Right.
which you can call the establishment.
Or proxies, I guess.
Yes. Thank you.
Balaji, I see you've got your hand up there as well.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Of
Eoghan, good to
course.
see you. Hi, how are you?
Good to see you as well. Long time.
Yeah, so one of the questions that in the survey was that were you targeted for some facts and figures?
Yeah.
So, I just want to know that there could be two scenarios regarding facts and figures. One is that the report itself had something wrong in it, so it was actually incorrect, or there was something not correct in it. In that case, we can't really blame somebody that targeting us. That is,
Yeah, of course.
yeah. But the other situation could be like the report. Suppose there is a report which targets X leader, and then there is nothing wrong in that report per se, but there are other people who start criticizing you that okay, you did this report which is targeting X, but you have not done this report which should have targeted leader Y. So I mean, they say that why you have done only this, why have not also done this.
Yeah. That's
So
something actually that after I had created this survey, I thought, yes, omission is another of the things that people will attack you over. Well, I remember some years ago when I was working for the Storyful News Agency, in one day, somebody contacted me and said, why are you so interested in Egypt? Why don't you look at Turkey? And the same day, somebody criticized me because they said I was obsessing about Turkey and why was I not looking at Egypt? So
yeah.
yeah, you do get this criticizing omission of something. Why are you not covering something else? So it's an implication of bias, I think.
So I was just wondering, is there something that we can do about this? I mean, it is not possible to target everyone in just one report. I mean, there can't be a report which has everything in it.
Yeah, I mean, the countermeasures are what I'm going to move on to next. So hopefully that we can find a way that it could fall under that.
Sure, thank you.
Sudhir, you've got a hand up also.
In India, as I have seen, there is no need to invite criticism. Media houses are divided, and media houses are doing their job in a subtle manner. They have started their fact-checking arms also, and they are persuading the agenda of the government. Media is divided, clearly divided, and the political class is throwing misinformation blatantly. So there are financial issues also. I can see in the small and medium newspapers, the journalists have no say in the strategy. They are bound to follow whatever the management says, and the situation is so grim that I come across one editor the other day who has started the marketing job for the company, and most of the journalists at regional level, they are I mean, they are fulfilling the uh, requirements of earning money through, I mean, other sources which are not legal also. So the situation is so grim, and they did not, I mean, they did not work for the users or readers. They work for their company and the management. So
Yeah.
it is really very difficult, and how to, I mean, how to train these people or how to confront these people has become really very difficult.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that in the survey there I included, when I said what channels are used, other media outlet, because as we know, some of us are working in very partisan and almost combative media environments, and quite often, the opposition is coming from within our what should be our own peer group, and it can be more
Yeah.
difficult to combat in that case.
So what can
I'm
be
just going
done
to take
for?
one or two more. I just want to take one or two more comments because we will go back at the end and we will have more time for Q&A. but we have other material we need to get through also. So just one or two quick comments, and we will circle back on this a little bit later. Sunil.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a lot of feedback. We like feedback, but not that kind.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, because the group all are sitting in a hall. That's the reason. Yeah.
Whoever's closest to you, get them to turn off their mic.
Yeah, crossing the speaker. Actually, in India, especially in Kerala, social media folks with a specific interest are targeting both print and digital media every time. Every time media publishes a story against them. At the same time, the interesting phenomenon is that the opposite groups will support the news that is against some other group. So how to manage such a situation in what you call it? Because in most of the cases, media are struggling to to tell the truth due to this kind of targeted attacks.
Yeah. Well, this is what we're going to move on to in the next section. Hopefully, it's something that can be applied to a lot of different media environments. I just see one more hand up. Jatin, had you another comment to make or question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll just put it down.
Oh, no, that's no problem. Okay, because obviously there are no easy answers to any of this. As Sunil points out, it can be very frustrating. And I'm going to move on now and bring up some of the possible solutions that I see. Again, I'm somebody who works in training and analysis and so on. You guys are at the coalface, and you may well have better versions of these solutions that I'm bringing up. So what I'm hoping is to provoke some discussion on this again at the end of the session. But thank you very much for the answers on that. That's really helpful to me. And I'm going to move back into talking at you again for a few minutes. So the way I see it, the current and the recent response to this kind of activity and behavior is very much reactive. We see after the fact the criticisms and the attacks that we're facing, and we try to respond, or not if we think that it's too much work for too little impact. It can be very frustrating, again, as averred to by Sunil there, that there can be such a deluge of attacks and efforts to undermine us that there's no way you can possibly handle all of them. And it is a drain on resources when we should be concentrating on creating quality, impactful journalism, to be constantly firefighting. You have the whack-a-mole game where you're trying to knock one down, another one jumps up, and it can be exhausting and very inefficient. So what I want to ask is whether we can head this off to a certain extent. We can, during the creation phase of our reporting, can we create stronger, more bulletproof reporting in the first place? Now, I'm not 100% sure that we can, but through my own experience and through conversations with people in media over the past 3 to 4 years, there are some suggestions that I'm coming up with. And this is why I was targeting media literacy and media literacy as a practice rather than simply a study discipline as being one possible way through this. Because this was my own first reaction. Don't we just have to create better stories and be very sharp in the way that we create our reporting in the first place? And isn't it just about good journalism? And I think, well, yes, to a certain extent, but also no, because, as I said, of the environment that we find ourselves now working in, that we are fielding attacks from a much greater variety of sources and at a much greater volume. So the approach that's being taken toward us has changed. Therefore, I think the approach that we take should also at least be slightly altered. Because it's not enough just to do quality reporting. And we need to know that our audience properly understands what we are reporting and how we are reporting it. Now, it's arguable that this does come into quality of reporting, that if our reporting is good enough and clear enough and not ambiguous, then the audience should understand it properly. But I think that may be slightly naive, because we know that there are people like the Steve Bannons of this world, which I pointed out earlier, flooding the zone, deliberately going out of their way to manipulate and mislead the public and try to ensure that they do not fully understand the way that we're reporting and try to get it seen through the lens that they supply. So when we talk about the public not understanding our journalism, that can sound elitist. It can sound like you're being patronizing or condescending toward your audience. I don't think that it is, because we have to acknowledge that there are powerful, disciplined, determined actors out there who are making it their mission to ensure that the public does not fully understand what we're reporting and how we're reporting it. There's significant effort to manipulate and undermine the media. So to say that the public doesn't fully understand us is not saying the public are idiots. It's saying that the public are being targeted and that this targeting is having an effect and an impact. So this is where I want to talk about, and again, I don't want to put myself up here as the guru of news literacy. There are far better people out there doing that. But just as an interface between the processes and principles of news literacy and how they can be brought to bear on the editorial process. And what I've tried to distill it down to, because I always try to make things as short and simple as possible, not have a big screed all about how we should be doing this, is to try to make checklists, questions for reporters and for editors on every significant story. And I know as journalists, we like to think that every story we cover is or should be significant. So what kind of things should we be asking every time we come up with a story and we think, this story is significant, it should have an impact, it should make changes, and it is likely to attract antagonism, is likely to attract opposition, and there are going to be people out there who will try to undermine both it and myself and my organization. How can we approach the story? So first of all, we look at the facts that we are going to be reporting on and see, can we decide how are people likely to perceive or misperceive this story? If I'm reporting about somebody who is generally a sympathetic character but is misbehaving, are people likely to perceive this, for example, as my having a personal agenda against this person? Are they going to think that there's a conspiracy going on? So what ways will people see this story that we maybe did not intend them to see it? Also, and this has become more important in the past few years because of organized and viral disinformation efforts and campaigns, is to try to know the environment in which you are sending that story out. It's like sending your kid out into the world or whatever. You want to know what the dangers are out there. Has this story or this issue or this subject been covered before? Has it then given rise to reaction, opposition, hostility? Am I aware of what that was, what form it took, what platforms it went out on, what counterclaims were being made? So it's important to know before you put the story out there whether you're sending it out into an environment in which it's already being sabotaged, when it's already subject to criticisms and hostility. Are there very specific related disinformation efforts? If you put out criticism of, say, a government minister, does this minister have supporters or proxies who have a track record of attacking these claims against him or any claims against him or her? So do we know what is likely to happen to our story once it goes out there? Are there memes? Are there counter facts or claims and so on? Once we know what those are, then we can look at our story again and say, are we effectively addressing them? are we putting this report and these facts out in such a way that it diffuses those kind of attacks before they even take place? Now, I know that, as I've already said, they will make up other claims, and you will never 100% cover all the bases on this. But you can do it to a certain extent. It doesn't mean that you have to ruin your story with constant references to now people might say this about A and this about B, they're not true, and so on. But this is a young discipline, a young field, and it's something we will get better at as we go along, and hopefully not completely destroy the flow and the impact of our stories by constantly worrying about the criticisms to which they may be subjected. Once we are happy with having done all this, this is where we come to the point of, I think, possibly promoting media literacy, because I think most of us would agree that media literacy among our audiences is something to strive for and is something that can become a major public good in the long term. So when you're producing a story like this, take a look at it and ask yourself, is there a way in which this story and in which we frame it and report it can improve media literacy, can make the public more aware of the importance of being literate? And again, this is where I would love to see media engaging with people like Masato and other people who are the top experts out there in media literacy, to see whether there's a way in which this can be brought to bear on reporting. I think, the recommendations I could make in this direction are far inferior to what some of these people could. So I would like to see newsrooms engage more with specialists in media literacy and see whether there is a seamless and smooth way of advancing the cause of media literacy through your everyday reporting. Now, the thing I go back to the days of newspapers, whoever remembers those. But we always had our last thing. I worked for years on a night desk, putting the last edition of a newspaper to bed. And we also always had what we called our pre-flight checklist, particularly for the front page. So things we would go through one by one and try to make sure that we had met all of these before we let the page go out there to the printers and then to the public. And I still love the idea of checklists because I think they can create efficiencies and effective reporting and effective work. So what are the kind of things? I've got a few points here. There's so many experienced working journalists here. I know that you possibly will have others that I haven't thought of, and hopefully we'll bring those in toward the end of the session. But as ever, we don't change the way we work as journalists when it comes to meticulously fact-checking, verifying, making sure that things are right, giving as little ammunition as possible to malicious actors with which they can attack us. But going beyond that, as I said, looking to find out what the environment is like. If you are covering a subject and you think it may be controversial and it's not something entirely new, do go and search. See whether there has been previous reporting done on this subject or on this issue. Then, many of you have been through workshops on searching social media, and you're quite skilled in this. So take a look back. See what kind of hashtags, memes, other kinds of disinformation campaigns and so on have been used to target this issue or this subject. If you do find them, evaluate how effective they've been, because it may just have been something that blew over in 24 hours and that didn't really have any long-term impact. But it's not that difficult to look and see whether it became self-sustaining, whether it went on for some time and did actually have an effect on the way the public perceived the original reports. It's important to do this kind of evaluation because what you don't want, as I said, is to be caught up in responses more than the original reporting itself. You don't want to be trying to cover every base unless it's absolutely necessary. We are short-handed in media. We have dwindling resources a lot of the time. We can't afford to be just going all over the place checking for every little nasty comment someone has made. So do look at these responses and see whether you think it's worth trying to engage with them and trying to handle them, or whether they're simply just an annoying nuisance. then if you do decide that these things do have to be addressed, you're going to then have to decide on your resources, on how much time you and how much what would I say, how many people and so on you can dedicate to attacking or to dealing with these things. Because again, we still have to be journalists, we still have to report, we can't spend all our time going tit for tat with malicious actors. So can we create effective preemptive measures that also don't actually ruin the tenor and the report and the tone of the reporting and the flow and so on? It still has to be good journalism, because if your entire report is about, well, what if somebody says this? Well, then we react to that. It can turn into something very messy and not particularly pleasant for the public to consume in the first place. As I said, these are 4 questions or 4 tasks that I would always take when reporting on something significant. From your experience and your expertise, you may well be able to flesh this out and make it something much more satisfactory. So how do we do this? How do we kick off this process and make sure that it is brought to bear on our newsrooms? First of all, training, of course, and developing the approach taken by reporters and editors. And this, again, is where I think the specialists in media literacy could be called or invited in to come up with a way that this becomes part of the daily beat and the daily discipline of news reporting. Right from the beat reporter right up to the desk editor and maybe managing editor level, that we do come to a recognition of how important it is to be able to defend our reporting before the attacks even start. Another thing, with some of the people I have discussed this with, because I've talked to some people in some of the biggest news agencies and major media outlets about this, and some did mention the idea of actually hiring somebody, introducing a role in the newsroom, like we already have things like engagement editors, audience editors, and things like that, that involve monitoring stories on an ongoing basis day to day. And this person, of course, would have to have expertise, maybe having been in contact with the news literacy experts in the first place, and be able to say, this is a very good story, but it could have been better in terms of preempting criticisms and covering itself against organized attacks. So somebody who actually, that is their role in the newsroom. I have to say, and I did say this before, that it probably wouldn't be my preferred option, because we know there are constantly cutbacks and things going on in journalism. And very often the jobs that have been introduced last can be the first ones to be let go again. So it's something that we've seen, things like audience editors being let go, like engagement specialists being let go and things like that. So this is a discipline and an activity that I would like to see embedded on an ongoing basis, and bringing in somebody who could just then be let go and all those activities be let go with them is a risky proposition. So just to sum up what I've been talking about over the past hour plus, is the main point: media literacy is not something that I think should be a separate discipline and something that media kind of reap the benefits of without ever being fully engaged with. It is media literacy. I think media should be the ones driving it and deciding what the requirements for it are, what the benefits it brings are, and how it can be used in our day-to-day reporting. Preempting attempts to undermine or to attack our reporting can be helpful, but should be something that is added to all the journalistic fundamentals that we already have, not something that distracts from them, not something that becomes the main focus of what we do. It should be something that helps to protect our reporting, to defend our news outlets, and to provide better journalism on an ongoing basis. So I did say I want to give plenty of time for questions and answers. We do have 15 to 20 minutes. Now, I'm happy to take questions here in the meet. I also have a link there to a virtual pin board, and I would love if people would contribute to that because, as I say, you're not coming here just to listen to me talk. There are so many people here with amazing levels of experience and expertise, and I think there's so many people here you can learn from. It's not just me. I will just bring this up briefly on the share it on the main screen. And as you'll see there, it's a virtual pin board. The links I'll go back to in a moment. There's a little plus icon down here in the corner. You can click on that, or you can simply double click anywhere on the board itself. And I have a few prompts up at the top under the main heading. It might be a bit too small for you to read here, but once you go through to the board, you will see it says, do you have an example of when your reporting has been targeted? What form did the targeting take? How did you respond? What worked? What could have been done better? And there may be other things you can address also, but these are just simple prompts, basically, things that you could possibly address. And what I will do is I will leave this pin board open for at least 24 hours. Maybe I'll leave it open for a few days if I see that there's still activity ongoing on it. And what I can do then is with this particular platform, Padlet, once this is full up or once people have stopped contributing, I can export the whole thing to a PDF, and I will make sure that everybody who attended here gets a copy of that PDF. And hopefully we'll have a good body of tips and information and experiences that we can all draw on going forward. So the link to that is, just let me get back. So again, there's the short link, which is case sensitive. You have to put those in uppercase. And there is a QR code that will also take you there. So if something occurs to you a few hours from now and you've got a moment free, please just add it to the board. And as I say, whatever is added to the board, everybody here will get a copy of it in a few days' time. But that aside, we still have about 15 minutes that we can dedicate here and now to questions, suggestions, criticisms, or anything else. So please, if you have something, click the little hand button there to raise your hand. And if not, I always wonder when there's not much in the line of questions and answers, I'm not sure whether everyone's satisfied or bewildered. Balaji. Yes.
One simple question that I have is that should we responding to the trolls or not? I mean, if there are people who are known trolls and they have to target us on something, so what do you suggest? Should we respond to them or just ignore them?
This is the point I brought up about whether you think it's worth it, whether you think they're having an impact, because trolls, of course, are out there very often not to persuade. They're there to distract you and take away your attention and prevent you from doing the kind of reporting that you should be doing. So if you think that they're not having any impact other than that, then I would say ignore them. If they do seem persuasive, if they are attracting a lot of follow-up comment, which is approving of their points, in that case, I would say it may be worth responding. But I think, you know, when you say troll, it generally means somebody who is just doing it to cause a distraction. And in the vast majority of cases, I would say, do not feed the trolls. Okay, I'm trying to remember what order these hands went up in. I think Prasant was next.
Thank you.
So have we got we have a few hands up. Prasant? Yeah.
Yes. Hello, Sweeney. Good morning. I'm working as a fact checker. So I would like to ask, what should be our strategy in the case of political fact checking? Because nowadays political leaders are also manipulating facts and history. Recently, about 2 to 3 days ago, a chief minister from the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh he said something manipulating history itself. He said that Chandragupta Maurya, who defeated Alexander, is not considered as great, but Alexander, who got defeated in the war against Chandragupta Maurya, is considered as great by historians, which is factually and historically incorrect. So, in the case of uh, such such things, when the political leaders itself manipulate facts and history, what should be our strategy in decoding such news?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like to hold myself up as the expert on particular environments or jurisdictions, but I would say that, you in such cases, you have to be able to marshal your facts very carefully. You can't impute agenda or bias to political figures because they will have the benefit of being able to bring laws to bear against you. So you have to be very specific in your criticisms and in your pointing out where they have been wrong. I think anything that is up for debate can be very dangerous in an environment where politicians are hostile to your way of working. Beyond that, because I'm not fully au fait with Indian media law, I would have to be very careful on making any kind of recommendation. I've finally been able to see the queue for what order people ask the questions in. Okay, or raised hands in. The next one is Venkatesh.
Hey, Owen, do you think I can go next?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just struggling with my audio.
Yeah, no problem. There's I can see now what the queue is. I can see the order that people raise their hands, and you are actually next. Or you want to wait for? You want to skip over one?
Okay, I think I can.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go for it.
So, this talk session has kind of lit a fire in me, because in the IFCN Global Fact that concluded, I'd recorded a video arguing that we should have something called media literacy journalism. But the way I was looking at it was that it should be, it should be seen as a separate genre or stream of journalism, like fact checking. The idea is that, an organization could perhaps pick up one issue every week and do a report on how it has been perceived by speaking to people who read the piece, how their emotions were activated by both the piece, the reporting, as well as the general noise in the social media space, as well as the attacks on that reporting, so that the process of doing such a report would itself teach people how any one piece of information or story can be manipulated and attacked. So what would you say to that?
I would be very much in favor of that.
I can't hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Yeah. I would be largely in favor of that. As I have said before, I would be wary of that kind of discipline being in any way compartmentalized. I think it would form part of what I would like to see, in that it's a very useful way to get journalists and media to internalize the importance of this. So I think I would see that as a very important, but still sort of an interim step. I would hope that it got to the point where something like that, which in the beginning would be really important, I would hope we would eventually get to the point where we would move beyond it, where it became such a natural part of the journalism we're doing that it would be no longer necessary to do kind of, special items. I may be wrong. That may be a pipe dream. It may not be possible to get to that point, but hopefully. I can see you and I are going to have more conversations about this, Venkatesh. Okay, I want to give everybody a chance who wants to contribute, if they can, because of the time of day here. I have to start getting my kids and my dog out the door soon. Aditi, you're next in line.
Hi, Owen.
Hi.
So my question is that when the allegations are an attack, say on corruption or on a religion of the reporter,
Yeah.
and which can be proven untrue, but obviously we don't have the resources to continuously engage in such allegations, and they're not related to reports. So how do you pre-bunk or preemptively put out information which is not related to your reports, but you're getting attacks for?
Yeah, I think that's something that's very difficult because, again, you have, bad actors who will specifically just maliciously attack and try to bully individual reporters into silence, or into not reporting what they don't want them to report, or into just having a poor reputation among the public. So I think in these cases, there's no easy answer, but it is very important for the news outlets to be very forceful in their defense of their journalists, and to make sure that they have whatever resources necessary, and whether this goes as far as counseling and things like that, because I do know reporters who have been severely affected by these kind of approaches. But to try to, I don't think there's any way that you can hit back effectively at the troll who attacks you on the basis of your religion, your gender, your political ideas or whatever, because you stomp down one of them, another one pops up, and it's something that unfortunately I think will always be with us. And the only way of mitigating it that I can see is for the outlets themselves to be very forthright in their support of their journalists and their defense of their journalist integrity.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, I see one more hand raised. Ali. Oh, I see two more raised now.
Okay, hello, Owen. My name is Imran. I'm from Malaysia.
Okay.
I run a fact check team. We are basically formed by a government-linked news house. It is just that for this fact-checking unit, we are allowed to work on independently. That means we are not. We are here. I'm in the newsroom, but the whole operation for the fact check team does not mixed with the the newsroom in general. So this is what we are trying to do in order to establish some sort of transparency and independency in terms of our fact checking process, and also on our reports. Do you think this is a good strategy, or anyway people will still go back and call you as part of the government arm or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a novel approach to me. It's something I'm not really, I couldn't claim to have any expertise in. I think this kind of a hybrid role maybe, where you're working with a government body but given a degree of independence from time to time, can be helpful. I'd be fascinated to hear feedback from your own experiences of it also. And frankly, I don't think I'm a very good person to answer it. I think you probably have the answers better than I have, or at least will have once you have been performing this for a sufficient period of time. But yeah, I mean, are there specific issues that you find with it, or do you find specific problems with it, or have you found it overall a positive experience?
We are just 1 year old, and I think by far we don't have any issue with the way we're working right now. It's just that going forward, of course, we will be facing a bigger crowd, and I just wonder if based on your experience, there has been an organization doing something similar to us and what they have done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of anybody else doing this. As I was kind of intrigued when you brought it up in the first place, simply because I'm not I'm not familiar with it. I've worked from time to time for government bodies myself. I spent a year with Yonhap News Agency in South Korea, which is not officially government linked, but of course there's a lot of influence. And I know there can be frustrations. So if this is something that 6 months or 12 months down the line you can tell us has been a positive endeavor overall and has had good results, then I'd be very, very interested in hearing more.
Okay,
But
sure. We'll keep in touch.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, we're starting to run out of time. Sachin. That's the only hand I can see still up. Are you still with us, Sachin?
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello. So my question is that nowadays fact-checking is becoming a business.
Yeah.
Many fact-checking organizations are taking this for money only and not taking care of the original cause.
Yeah.
The main problem is that common people are losing their faith on the mainstream media and especially on the new fact-checking sites, and they are more relying on the local news portals. Especially in our country, there are a lot of local news portals which are concentrating in some districts or some states, and people are more relying on these local news portals. And many of these news portals are partisans and have some vested interest. And
yeah.
These news portals are taking or creating fake news. People have lost their faith in these fact-checking mainstream media or mainstream fact-checking organizations and relying on these fake news producing news portals. What is your say on this?
Yeah, I mean, the very first thing you mentioned there, you said fact-checking is becoming a business. And of course, in many ways, that's not a good thing, because when financial considerations come into play, it can corrupt everything else. But in another way, it's a good sign, because anything that's becoming a business obviously means there's a demand and it's successful. So what we need to do is try to ensure that high standards are maintained as it moves in that direction. Of course, if that doesn't appear to be the case, or if we're getting overwhelmed with fact-checking operations popping up left, right, and center, and like you said, people starting to be a bit cynical about it, about the mainstream media and the professional fact-checkers, then yes, of course, it may undermine the very mission that we set out to achieve in the first place. And then you mentioned also about the small hyper-local media. And of course, when you're operating in that kind of a small hyper-local environment, there is a lot of pressure to take sides and to be partisan, because it can be hard to maintain your place and to survive even in such an environment without having some kind of backing. So I don't think it's a particularly new approach needed anywhere. It's a question of trying to maintain standards. And, we have certifications and things, but it's, who trusts the certifications, who decides where they come from. And it's a frustrating issue. Is all I can say, really. The only point about it is to try to keep standards high. How we go about that is the next question. And right now, I don't think I have a satisfactory answer. Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut things off very soon. It's been really fantastic. I wish I had more than an hour and a half. I wish I had like 3 days to spend with a group like this, but unfortunately I don't. Please do, if you have anything else that you haven't had a chance to say, or anything that occurs to you later today or tonight or at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning or next week, please feel free to contact me directly. You have my contact details now on screen. Also, feel free to add things to the virtual pinboard, because that way everybody learns something. I will learn so much. I mean, it's great for me to be able to harvest that pinboard at the end and get so much expertise and experience from the people who have attended. And please add your thoughts there. And I hope to see most of you, all of you, some of you again soon. For the rest of your day, have a great day. And thank you very much for being here.